Have you ever thought about using coding to work on social skill instruction? That is what we are discussing today on the ABA Speech podcast. Jessica DeMarco is our guest, and I met her or saw her training come across my desk because she presented at FABA, which is a wonderful, very hip conference that takes place every single year in September in Florida. And she is a third year doctoral student at Georgia State University. And she's also a former special education teacher. So she really gets how to reach our students. She is working on a really wonderful project called Project Social Code. So today in the podcast, you're going to learn what is Project Social Code, how can you use block coding to work on social skill instruction with your students, and this is the coolest part. All of this information is completely free over at projectsocialcode.org. She has the resources. She has visuals. If you are listening and you want some outside of the box thinking on how you can work on social language skills in a cool, cooperative way, this is an amazing episode. Let's get into it. I'm Rose Griffin, a speech therapist, board-certified behavior analyst, and founder of ABA Speech. It wasn't all that long ago that I felt overwhelmed by providing therapy for my autistic students and any students who were not yet speaking. Fast forward through many doubts, tears, research, and courses, and you will see the framework that I use today and share with over 60,000 readers weekly. One that will help you support your students and feel more confident in the process. I created the ABA Speech podcast to give you simple, step-by-step strategies to help you reach all of your students wherever they are on their communication journeys. If you're a speech therapist, BCBA, RBT student, or parent who's looking to help all students develop a way to communicate with the world, you are in the right place, friend. Let's get started. Welcome to the show. We have a great show today. Thank you so much, Jessica, for coming on to the show. It's great to see you again.
Yes, you as well. Thanks for having me, Rose.
And Jessica came on my radar because I was on a mission last year to go to a lot of in-person conferences. And I got asked to do this keynote last year. And so instead of hyperventilating and being panicked about it, I was like, I'm going to present in person as much as I can. So I did that. And I feel really good with that skill. But I did FABA, which is this awesome conference down in Florida. I live in Ohio, so going down to Miami, it's funny. I'll actually be at Sunny Isles, like right by where FABA was in a couple weeks with my family. It'll be the third time in 12 months. I know, I should just move. But that I'll be down there. But Jessica actually did a talk that I didn't even see, but I was just browsing through the FABA book. Sometimes it's hard to see all the talks, especially when you present or you have a booth. And I came across your talk and I was like, ooh, this looks interesting. So can you tell us a little bit about, what you do, kind of how you started in the field and what you're up to now?
Sure, yeah. So I am currently a BCBA, working part-time, and I'm a full-time PhD student, kind of going into my last year of dissertation and whatnot. Interestingly enough, I used to be a special education teacher, loved the field, loved everything, just realized that behavior was more of my jam than teaching. So I went back, got my started getting my PhD, took my credits, and now here I am.
That's amazing. Yeah. And you presented at FABA. That's so cool. How did that? Well, you're working on a project. That's probably how it organically came about. I did a whole CEU talk on presenting and sharing because I think sometimes, like if you're getting your PhD or if you have your PhD or if you're a small business owner, it kind of sometimes makes sense. It's just organic that you're going to probably present at a conference. But I think some people are nervous about it. They don't understand how you're invited or you submit a proposal or, there's a lot of different scenarios, as we know. So that's probably what brought you to FABA. And what was the nature of your talk? Like, what did you discuss? I know we're going to talk about it in depth here, but.
Yeah, and you're right, Rose. As part of this project, we always want to make sure we disseminate our research, right? And part of the PhD program is presenting. I love presenting. There are a lot of nerves. One little tip that you said, your listeners sometimes get nervous, is that you're the expert. When you're up there, you're the expert talking about it. And I always have to remind myself of that because there's
Hmm.
still a lot of nerves. But yeah, I think for me, the point of that presentation was really to kind of bring it more into the ABA field, this project. And we'll kind of get into, I guess, what the project is, but it was more developed to be in schools. So I was thinking, I really want it to kind of cater to BCBAs, to RBTs, to people that are not just in education. So that was kind of the point of that, the talk, was
Oh,
to kind of bring that more to the ABA field and see how it could be applicable, in that arena.
that's great. And I feel like this episode reminds me a lot about we had Rob Harvey on from Pennsylvania. I did this talk in my 12 conferences last year at this conference called NAC in Harrisburg, and he is a BCBA, and he talked about using Dungeons and Dragons to work on social skills. And I was like, ooh, so outside of the box thinking. And this is really kind of along those same lines of like, we have something we want to work on with students to enrich their lives. And what we're going to talk about is so exciting, but it is outside of the box thinking on how to support learners. So can you tell us a little bit about Project Social Code?
Yeah, so Project Social Code, it is a $2.5 million grant, 5-year grant. We're actually going into our last year of it right now. Um, and it was basically aimed to embed social skill instruction into coding curriculum. Now, when I say coding, people are probably thinking of those very complicated syntax on a screen, but when we talk about coding in this sense, it's block coding, which is essentially a visual representation of a code. I know
Mm.
it's kind of hard because I can't really show anything, but essentially just imagine just little blocks that have coding and you can kind of click and drag. So it's
Oh.
very user friendly for anybody that's learning how to use it. And it
Mm.
basically lays down the principles of coding without having to be able to write difficult syntax and coding stuff like you usually like see on like movies and stuff.
Okay.
So
Interesting.
yeah, so basically it wanted to kind of bridge that gap of introducing students with disabilities into more complicated types of science, right? Um, so when we think about social skills and we think about them being taught, like you said, we wanted to kind of think outside the box of how we could do that, so we kind of married these two things into one.
Oh, that's interesting because as a small business owner, I do have a tech team, but I do understand what you mean by coding because
Yeah.
along these 8 years that I've had this business, I've been in, I haven't always had that tech team. So I've been learning little things along the
Sure.
way. And so, okay, that's interesting. So for me, that does make sense about the coding and how block coding is kind of this visual representation. Instead of doing all that code on your own, you're kind of manipulating. Okay, kind of reminds me of my first website. It was on Wix for anybody who wants to start a business. That was nice and easy because more of a drag and drop versus
Exactly.
having to do WordPress. Because I remember looking at my WordPress site and my husband, who's in medical device sales, doesn't get it. And I was like up at 1 a.m. and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do this on my own. This epiphany of it's like, yeah, you can't be a developer if you're not a developer. So what you're
Yeah.
saying really, I understand what you're saying here. Okay, interesting. Okay, block coding. So, why do you think exposure to coding is important for our students that we're potentially supporting?
Sure. Great question. So to kind of back up, when we think about coding, it's under the umbrella of STEM, right? Science,
Mhm.
technology, engineering, and mathematics. And there has been a big push for that in the education system. Some schools, even in the county that I live in, actually have STEM classes that the kids go to.
Mm.
However, as we know, our kids with disabilities are often left out of things like that.
Mm.
And really, the top two reasons are because of low teacher expectations and communication challenges.
Mhm.
So, for me, the reason why this project was so important to me is that it's a way to get them involved at a level that they're able to. Which so you know, STEM is in engineering and coding is a 21st job skill, 21st
Hmm.
century job skill, right? So when we introduce those kids, studies have shown when we introduce kids to STEM earlier, they're more likely to go into those fields and use those abilities that they have and the wonderful things that people with disabilities can bring to us, make sure that we cultivate that so they
Hmm.
can go into the job force if that's something that they want to do. So I think it's just the fact, I mean, I know I was a teacher and my kids were left out of a lot of things because they
Yeah.
exactly that low teacher expectation and communication challenges, right? So
Hmm.
this project to kind of back step a little bit, when we developed the project, we made sure that it was accessible to every learner on
Mm.
every level. So if the lesson plans that we created, you know, um, required a choral responding, we made sure that we had visuals for those kids that weren't able to vocalize and that they could use their AAC device or could
Mm.
point or, just anything. We wanted it to become accessible because all kids can learn, right? They can learn. And so it was really, really important to us that we did that. So to me, that's why it's important is because we're giving them access to something that they
Mhm.
probably wouldn't have had access to beforehand.
Yeah. Oh, I
And
love.
it builds problem solving skills. It
Hmm.
builds there's just a ton of chances for social and communication initiations, responses, teamwork, parallel play. I mean, you just go along the list and there's all of them. It's all the boxes are checked.
Yeah, I love that. So as part of this larger project, so were you developing the curriculum and or were you going into school districts to implement it or coaching teachers on that? I feel like I'm thinking like behavioral skills training is coming up in my mind, which we
Yeah.
did a course in the ABA speech connection. If you're a speech therapist, you might not have heard of behavioral skills training. But it is ASHA approved for speech therapists and it's also ACE approved. But I love that idea of it's kind of like train the trainer where that's what's coming into my mind. But what does
Yeah.
this look like exactly?
Yeah, and I'm glad you asked that because I was gonna kind of make sure I talked about this. So we took a already existing coding curriculum. It's from Wonder
Okay.
Workshop, okay? And what we did, sorry, what we did was if one lesson was learning about, I don't know, algorithms,
Hmm.
we took that one lesson and divided it into three lessons. And then we also, so try to think about, we had our social skill framework, which was essentially just what social skills did we want to teach, which are the very common ones, manding, describing, engaging, just all the typical ones. So we had that over here. We had this already existing coding curriculum because we are not experts in coding, and then kind of married them to develop something that the teachers could uh could implement, right?
Oh,
Now this took a very, very long time. And what I love about it, Rose, I don't know if I told you about this, but we had a speech pathologist on our team. We had
yeah.
BCBAs, we had special education teachers. So it was a very like multidisciplinary approach to
Hmm.
teaching. And the end product looks like PowerPoints, which
Hmm.
are free on a website, which I'll tell you at the end of the podcast. Everything's open access. But it just goes, and we use behavioral principles. We use time delay. We use reinforcement. We use, prompting. We use all these kind of embedded skills that really we don't even have to teach the teachers because they're kind of embedded in there.
Yeah.
And to answer your question about how do we kind of do this, we did create professional development, and then we do go into the classes and help the teacher provide feedback. They provide feedback for us. So yeah, it's been a great project, and I love going in and talking to teachers and working with teachers. So it's been great.
Oh, that's nice. And I love that because I was a speech therapist at a middle school, high school level for 10 years. I love that age group so much. And sometimes I know that speech therapists really struggle with what can we do that's functional or a collaborative lesson. In high school, we would start to talk about vocational activities and things like that. But this seems like it lends itself nicely to a type of collaborative lesson plan with things that are already in place, which I'm excited to. When you said open access, I think that means free people. I think everybody's ears perked up. So we'll have to share this on my Instagram. I have this whole thing called speech therapy hacks, and it's like free resources. So I'll have to share this. I'm always thinking. So who is a good candidate for this type of group then? Like age wise or skill level, or do you have like an ideal candidate?
Yeah, I mean, this particular project was designed for elementary school kids.
Okay.
I haven't really used it with older kids before,
Yeah.
but I'm sure it would be. And in fact, we just started working with a pre-K class for the first time.
Wow.
And
Oh.
that's been really cool. We literally just started like 2 weeks ago. And there was just a little, like, literally, I was going through the slides. There was one slide we had to modify on, like, which word is this? Because they can't read yet. But other
Yes.
than that, everything was like really, really good. And they did so
Wow.
good. And they were so excited. And I
Yeah.
don't even think I said this at the beginning, Rose, but when they code, they
Yeah.
move a robot. It's a little
Oh,
robot. The only thing that costs money is the robot's like $175. But they actually you can do virtual dash. Dash is the
yeah.
robot. But yeah, so they were so excited. And I mean, when we come in, the kids will be like, "Where's Dash? Where's Dash? I want to
Aw,
play with Dash." So yeah.
that's neat. Okay, so they're doing this block coding that then correlates with Dash, this robot that is Dash like doing things based on the
Yes.
block coding that they set up. Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, just a couple weeks ago, I was in a classroom and they got to pick what animal noises Dash
Oh,
made, and it was so cute. And
yeah.
one of the little girls wanted it to make a horse sound.
Yeah.
So we programmed it to do a horse sound, and it was
Oh,
really cool.
fun. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, I love this. I've never done anything like this. It's neat though. And it seems like it's cooperative. Like that was something that I do miss. Like I'm not doing those types of groups anymore with having my business, but I used to love planning like cooperative groups because it's really about that peer-to-peer interaction that I'm sure is taking place. And as a speech therapist, I really loved thinking outside of the box of like, how can we get kids to talk to
Yeah,
each other that may not, because it goes back to that employability. Like I love the idea of like if we get kids familiar with this now, then when they become older, then this seems like it's something that's open and is ready for them because it's something that's familiar, which we all gravitate towards things that are more familiar. So I love that you
sure,
brought that up because you're like planting the seed, for the
sure.
students and for the team too when it comes to that age of like transition or like what does the kid have familiarity with and with parents too because we know that the research says that autistic individuals like the how they're not employed or whatever that stat is. It's really
Yeah,
staggering, right? I know you
yeah,
know that statistic, yeah, or
yeah.
underemployed. So,
It is, and I think too, just like leveraging what awesome skills they do have, you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
just being able to use that creativity and that different way of thinking to their advantage.
right. So, what does a typical session look like then? So, what would this like? I'm getting my school-based SLP hat on because I am 2 days a week, and I'm thinking like, what would this really look like in action? So, what does a session look like?
Yeah, so it usually starts off with the teacher doing some direct instruction, teaching the word of the day or the vocab word, which is usually some sort of coding word. But it
Mhm.
also this is what I wanted to get into. But it also directly teaches social skills. So there's always a social skill and there's always a coding word. So let's go with sequence and describing. So we
Mhm.
actually don't use any ABA terminology because we want it to
Mhm.
be very accessible. So we'll do describing, right? So they will learn, they will teach the skill, and then they will give a practice opportunity for the social skill of the day. So say it's describing, maybe they'll put something off on the board and they'll be like, let's describe what Dash looks like. And then we'll
Right.
say, is it, he's blue and this. And then they'll give them a practice opportunity to do that with their peers. So, can you
Mm.
describe something that maybe your friend's wearing? So then they get that actual practice.
Mhm.
And then they go through some coding together. And then the idea then is to kind of split them off in groups, give them a task, a coding
Mhm.
task. And then they have to kind of figure it out for themselves. Of course, there's some level of prompting that,
Yeah.
depending on the level of the kid, that's what's kind of look like. And then they actually get to, work with their peers or other
Yeah.
teachers or parapros, whoever's in the room. And then while they're doing that, the teacher always prompts, hey, remember, we want to make sure we're describing what the problem is to our friend or if you need help. So it always goes back to the social skills. It always goes
Hmm.
back to prompting those. And it always kind of goes back to making sure that you're giving the kids the opportunity to problem solve, right? It's
Hmm.
okay
Right.
if they don't do it right the first time, but how are they going to move forward? Do they need a little prompt? Hey, ask little Johnny over there if you can have a turn or
Hmm.
something like that. So that's what I
Yeah.
love about it. It's just collaborative and you're getting so much instruction in like a fun way
Hmm.
that's not
Yeah.
boring.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. So, I mean, so it sounds like it might be. We've been doing these talks in the ABA Speech Connection, our membership, about like the AIM curriculum. And I've been using that. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's an interesting curriculum. We talked about it last year. It kind of talks about ACT, and there's a meditation component, and it's really cool. But there's a lesson, and all these extension activities. And it seems like kids that are doing that type of curriculum, this might be something neat to kind of supplement that, where you're
Sure.
working on the cooperation, where you're working on problem solving and coming back to the group and describing. So yeah, it's really interesting. I love that because I think sometimes people just struggle with like, what are we going to plan for this group time? Or like, I don't know. I know we need to like embed this across the kids' day, but I'm just not sure like what makes sense during this time.
Totally.
And I think sometimes because you were a teacher, like, I've been an administrator, I've been in, a role where I'm in direct care with the students. It's like some teachers really struggle with that. Like downtime can be really hard, like as a
Sure.
classroom teacher, downtime can be scary, right? Because oftentimes our kids really struggle with having leisure skills. And this is
Oh, yeah.
something that lends itself to that too. It's like, wow, this is like an enriched time, but it's more a little unstructured, but there is structure. And so then it does lend itself to those opportunities to practice these skills kind of in a safe space, is what it sounds like to me.
Yeah,
Um, that's
sure.
neat. So what is some of the feedback from the teachers? Are they enjoying this? And I'm sure that they like this and seeing the kids in this different realm.
They do. They loved it. We had really great feedback from teachers. I think one of the most amazing things that I remember a teacher saying is I think it was like a moderate severe classroom,
Yeah.
and they were maybe third graders, and one of the kids had never ever initiated conversation or anything with another student, like
Yeah.
never. And during the context of this project, he asked his peer for something during a lesson. And it was just like, the teacher
Yeah.
was just ecstatic and like, that's what the project's about. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like that's what it is right there. Is
Yeah.
getting kids to feel comfortable, getting them to communicate. And that was just really powerful. So, but they love it. Yeah, the teachers love it. And seeing the kids' little faces too. I think when
Right.
they see Dash and everything, it's just really, really rewarding. So
That's amazing. I love that. So, if people wanted to get started with offering something that's similar, I know you mentioned that there was a website where they could get access to some materials. Can you share that with us?
it's projectsocialcode.org. And you'll have to go to the resources page on the top, and you have to create just a free account, very
Got
simple.
it. Okay.
And then what we did is we posted all the lesson plans that we created.
Wow.
There's, visuals, there's some how-to guides. But yeah, that's all on there. Like I said, now the robot is like
Right.
$125. But you can use Virtual Dash, which is
Yeah.
you could still program, you could still do it. And then all
Yeah.
you need is a smartphone. It's just an app.
Okay.
It's called the
Oh,
Blockly app that you
okay.
can download for free. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is
Oh,
amazing. I
ah,
love this. It sounds like you're doing such important work. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, and it was great to have you on.
thank you so much, Rose. It was great. Thanks for having me.